I worked maintenance at Wonderland Amusement Park for 3 summers during college. It was decent pay, and I got to work mostly alone, which suited me fine. The park had been around since the 1960s, and some of the attractions showed their age. My job was to keep everything running smoothly behind the scenes. The funhouse was always my least favorite area to work on. Not because it was particularly difficult, just something about the place made my skin crawl. The mirrors, the warped floors, the way sound seemed to bounce around in there. But it was popular with visitors, so I had to maintain it like everything else. One Tuesday morning in late August, I got a call from my supervisor about a problem in the funhouse. A mirror had cracked, and apparently some guests had complained about strange reflections the night before. I figured it was just the distorted glass playing tricks on people, but a cracked mirror was a safety hazard. I grabbed my tools and headed over around 9 a.m. before the park opened. The funhouse was eerily quiet without the usual screams and laughter echoing through it. I made my way through the maze of mirrors, following the path to where the cracked mirror should be. When I found it, I stopped cold. The crack ran diagonally across the mirror, but that wasn't what bothered me. In the reflection, I could see myself clearly, too clearly. The mirror was supposed to be one of the distorting ones that made you look tall and thin, but I appeared completely normal. I moved closer, and that's when I noticed something else. My reflection was wearing different clothes. I was wearing my usual work uniform, blue coveralls and a baseball cap. But in the mirror, I saw myself in a red polo shirt and jeans. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I was more tired than I'd realized. But when I looked again, the reflection was still wrong. I reached out to touch the mirror, and my reflection did the same. But there was a delay, maybe half a second, between my movement and the reflection's response. That's when I noticed the reflection's eyes weren't quite looking at me. They were looking slightly to my left, as if watching something behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there except empty mirrors stretching in every direction. When I turned back, my reflection was gone entirely. The mirror showed only the empty funhouse behind me. I called my supervisor immediately and told him I needed to section off the area. I made up some story about the mirror being more damaged than it appeared, potentially dangerous. He agreed, and I put up barriers around that section of the funhouse. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I stayed after closing time. I waited until the park was completely empty, then made my way back to the fun house with a flashlight. The cracked mirror was still there, still blocked off. I stood in front of it and shone my light directly at the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a reflection appeared. But it wasn't me. It was someone who looked exactly like me, but older. Maybe 10 years older. He was wearing a security uniform I didn't recognize, and his face was gaunt, exhausted. He was holding up a sign, pressing it against the glass from his side. The sign read, "Don't work here anymore. Leave now." I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam wavering. When I steadied it on the mirror again, the reflection was gone. But now I could see something else in the cracked glass. Dozens of other reflections, all of them workers in different uniforms, all of them holding signs with the same message. I ran. I didn't stop running until I reached my car in the parking lot. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. On Friday, I went in just long enough to quit. My supervisor seemed unsurprised. He mentioned that the funhouse had a high turnover rate in maintenance staff. People rarely lasted more than a few months working on it. Something about the mirrors making people uncomfortable. I never went back to Wonderland, but I kept tabs on it through local news. 2 months after I quit, there was a small article about the funhouse being permanently closed due to structural concerns. The park lasted another year before shutting down entirely. But the story didn't end there. About 6 months after the park closed, I got a call from a demolition company. They'd found my old business card in the maintenance office and needed to ask me about the funhouse. Apparently, when they tried to remove the mirrors, several of their workers had reported seeing disturbing reflections and refused to continue. The project manager wanted to know if I'd experienced anything similar. I told him I couldn't help them and hung up. But curiosity got the better of me. I drove by the old park site a few weeks later. The demolition had stopped completely. The funhouse was the only building still standing, surrounded by empty lots where the other attractions had been. A chain link fence surrounded it, with signs warning people to stay away. Sometimes I wonder what those reflections were trying to warn me about. What would have happened if I'd stayed? But mostly, I try not to think about it. I've avoided mirrors ever since, especially the old ones. Because sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a glimpse of that older version of myself in the corner of my eye, still wearing that security uniform, still trying to warn people about something they can't understand yet. Last week, I saw a news article about a developer who bought the old Wonderland site. They're planning to build condos where the funhouse once stood. The article mentioned that construction workers have been reporting strange accidents and unexplained equipment failures. 3 different contractors have already walked away from the project, citing unusual circumstances. I wonder if those mirrors are still trying to protect people, even buried under rubble and time. My family visited Cedar Point every summer when I was a kid. It was our big vacation, and I lived for those trips. The year I turned 16, I was finally tall enough to ride everything, including the massive wooden roller coaster called Thunder Mountain, the park's oldest and most famous attraction. It was our last night there, and the park was staying open late for a special event. My parents had gone back to the hotel, trusting me to find my own way back. I wanted to ride Thunder Mountain one more time before we left in the morning. The line was surprisingly short for such a popular ride. I figured most families with younger kids had already headed home. I got in line behind a group of teenagers who looked about my age, chatting excitedly about their favorite rides. As we moved closer to the front, I noticed something odd. The ride operator looked ancient, much older than the typical college-age staff I'd seen working other attractions. His skin was weathered and pale, and his uniform looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. But he seemed to know what he was doing, efficiently loading and unloading guests. When it was my turn, I climbed into the front car. The safety bar clicked into place, and the old operator walked by, checking each car. When he got to mine, he paused and looked directly at me. "First time in the front?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied. He nodded slowly. This old coaster has been running for 47 years, seen a lot of changes in that time. But some things never change. He patted the side of my car. "You'll see what I mean." The ride started with the familiar click, click, click of the chain lift. As we climbed higher, I could see the entire park spread out below us, The lights were beautiful, twinkling like stars. But as we reached the top, I noticed something strange. The park looked different. The newer rides were gone, replaced by attractions I didn't recognize. The buildings looked older. The signs were in a different style. It was like looking at the park from decades ago. We crested the hill and began the first drop. The rush of wind and speed was incredible, even better than I'd expected. But as we rounded the first curve, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were people on the tracks ahead of us, not maintenance workers, actual guests, walking along the rails as if they were on a leisurely stroll. They were dressed in clothes from different eras, some in 1970s bell-bottoms, others in 1980s neon, some in styles so old they looked like they were from the park's opening day. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but no sound came out. The coaster was barreling toward them at full speed. I closed my eyes, bracing for the horrible impact, but when I opened them, the people were gone. The tracks were clear, and we were racing through the rest of the course normally. I looked back at the other passengers, but they seemed completely unfazed, laughing and raising their hands in the air. When the ride ended, I was shaking. I stumbled out of the car, my legs barely holding me up. The old operator was there, helping guests out of their seats. "Good ride?" he asked me. "I saw. There were people on the tracks," I managed to say. He nodded knowingly. Thunder Mountain has a long memory. Sometimes the past and present get a little mixed up, especially late at night. The ride remembers everyone who's ever been on it. "What do you mean?" 47 years of riders, he said softly. Some of them never really left. They keep coming back, riding the same ride they loved when they were alive. You saw them because you were in the front car, closest to the other side. I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. "Are you saying those people were dead?" "Some of them, yes. Natural causes mostly. Old age, accidents, illness. But they loved this ride so much that part of them stayed. They're harmless, just looking for one more ride on their favorite coaster." I looked back at Thunder Mountain, its wooden structure creaking and groaning as another group of riders made their way through the course. The idea that ghosts were riding along with the living should have terrified me, but somehow it didn't. "Will I see them again?" I asked. The old operator smiled. "Only if you come back, and only if you ride in the front car. Most people stick to the middle or back. They can sense something's different up front, even if they don't know what it is." I nodded and started to walk away, but he called after me. "Son, when you get older, when you have kids of your own, you'll understand. Some places get into your blood. Some experiences are so perfect that you never want them to end. This ride, this park, for some people, it becomes there forever." I left the park that night with my head spinning. We moved across the country the next year, and I never made it back to Cedar Point. But sometimes, especially on summer nights, I think about Thunder Mountain and wonder if I'll ever ride it again. Part of me hopes I will, and part of me hopes that when I do, I'll have the courage to sit in the front car one more time. Years later, I found out that the old operator had passed away just a few weeks after my visit. When I called the park to ask about him, they had no record of anyone matching his description working there. The person I spoke with mentioned that Thunder Mountain had been running with automated systems for over a decade. No human operators needed. I also learned something else that made my blood run cold. The park had installed cameras on Thunder Mountain a few years before my visit, after some safety concerns. I managed to get a copy of the footage from that night, and when I watched it, I saw myself in the front car, apparently talking to empty air and nodding at nothing. The ride operator I'd spoken with, the one who told me about the ghostly passengers, wasn't there at all, because now I understand what the old operator meant. Some experiences are too good to let go of, even when you're supposed to move on. Maybe that's not such a bad thing after all. Sometimes I still dream about that night, about the figures walking on the tracks and the kind old man who explained everything. In those dreams, I'm always in the front car, and I'm never afraid. Maybe someday I'll be one of those eternal riders too, helping newcomers understand that death doesn't have to mean the end of joy. I was 7 when my grandmother first took me to Rosewood Park. It was a small, local amusement park that had been around since her childhood, and she loved showing me the same ride she'd enjoyed as a little girl. But there was one ride that was her absolute favorite, the carousel. The carousel at Rosewood was beautiful, with hand-carved horses that had been painted and repainted dozens of times over the decades. Each horse was unique, with its own personality and details. But Grandma always insisted we ride the same 2 horses, a white mare with a flowing mane for her, and a smaller brown pony with kind eyes for me. "That's Sunshine," she'd tell me, pointing to my horse. "She's been my favorite since I was your age. She'll take good care of you." I loved riding Sunshine. Even though I knew it was just a wooden horse on a pole, there was something special about her. She seemed to smile at me, and I always felt safe when I was on her back. Grandma and I would ride the carousel together every visit, always on the same 2 horses. This tradition continued for years, even as I got older and started preferring the more exciting rides. I'd still ride the carousel with Grandma. She'd tell me stories about the old days, about how the park had changed over the years, about the friends she'd made there as a child. When I was 15, Grandma got sick. She spent most of that summer in the hospital, and we didn't make it to Rosewood Park at all. She passed away in September, just as the leaves were starting to change. The next summer, I went to Rosewood Park by myself. I hadn't been there without Grandma, and it felt strange. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, older and a little run down. But I found myself drawn to the carousel. I paid for a ticket and climbed onto Sunshine, my old favorite. The horse felt different somehow. The paint was more chipped than I remembered, and the saddle seemed worn. But I settled in and waited for the ride to start. As the carousel began to turn, I noticed something odd. The white mare next to me, Grandma's horse, was moving. Not just the normal up and down motion of the carousel, but actually turning her head, looking at me with painted eyes that seemed suddenly alive. I blinked hard, sure I was imagining things. But when I looked again, the white mare was definitely moving independently of the carousel's mechanism. She turned her head toward me, and, I swear this is true, she winked. Then I heard it. Grandma's voice, soft and warm, carried on the wind over the carousel's music. "Still riding Sunshine, I see." I looked around frantically, but there was no one else on the carousel. The other horses were empty, their riders having chosen other activities. But I could hear Grandma's voice clearly, as if she was sitting right next to me. "I missed you this summer," the voice continued, "but I'm glad you came back." This place isn't the same without family. Tears started running down my cheeks. I reached out toward the white mare, and for just a moment, I felt the warmth of a hand squeezing mine. The carousel music seemed to swell, becoming more beautiful and complex than it had any right to be. "I have to go soon," Grandma's voice said, "but I wanted you to know that I'm okay. And I wanted to tell you something important about Sunshine." I leaned closer to the white mare, hanging on every word. "She's not just a carousel horse, sweetheart. She's a guardian. She's been watching over children in this park for almost 60 years. She watched over me when I was little, just like she watched over you. And someday, when you have children of your own, she'll watch over them too." The carousel was slowing down now, coming to the end of its cycle. I could feel Grandma's presence starting to fade. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. "And remember, some things are more than they appear to be. Some things are made of love and memory and hope. Those things never really break, no matter how old they get." The carousel stopped. The white mare was just a wooden horse again, staring straight ahead with painted eyes. But Sunshine, my old favorite, seemed to be looking right at me, and I could have sworn I saw her nod. I've been back to Rosewood Park many times since then. I always ride the carousel, and I always choose Sunshine. Sometimes I bring friends. Sometimes I go alone. The park has changed over the years. Some rides have been removed, new ones added, but the carousel remains with its beautiful hand-carved horses. Last month, I took my 4-year-old nephew there for his first visit. He was nervous about the carousel at first, but I helped him choose a horse. He picked Sunshine, just like I had all those years ago. As we rode together, I watched his face light up with joy, and I could have sworn I heard Grandma's gentle laughter mixing with the carousel music. After the ride, my nephew looked up at me with wide eyes. "That horse was special," he said. "She was talking to me." "What did she say?" I asked. "She said she'd keep me safe," he replied. "And she said my great-grandma was watching." I smiled and took his hand. "She always is," I told him. "She always is." Later that evening, as we walked back to the car, my nephew tugged on my sleeve. "Uncle," he said, "the lady on the white horse next to us was really nice. She had the same smile as great-grandma in the pictures." I stopped walking and looked back at the carousel, which was now empty and still in the growing darkness. The white mare stood motionless, but somehow I knew she was smiling too. Some guardians, I realized, work in pairs, and some love transcends even death, finding new ways to protect the people it cares about most. That night, I called my mother and told her about our visit. When I mentioned what my nephew had said about the lady on the white horse, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that gave me chills. "Your grandmother always said that carousel had a way of bringing families together across generations. I never understood what she meant until now,